All right.
One second.
Namo Siddhadam. Welcome everybody for another session of Jain Heritage Centers, where we are celebrating 20th anniversary of Jain Heritage Centers, and we are calling it Jain Heritage Festival. So in the continuous series of our webinars, where different scholars around the world and people are presenting their views on Jain Heritage Center, including their research on Jain heritage. So before we go there and we start, introducing our speakers for today, let me give you a quick introduction of Jain Heritage Centers. All right. So we talk about our organization and the website which we launched. In a very quick snapshot, jainheritagecenters.com was founded on 26th May 2002. So we are celebrating the 20 years of Jain Heritage Centers. Dr. H. and Nitin H P, whom we have today as one of the speakers as well, is the founder of Jain Heritage Centers. It was inaugurated by late Dr. M.D. Vasantaraja. So that was a privilege to have an eminent personality to inaugurate Jain Heritage Centers and conceptualize the entire idea. In 20 years, we have gone far beyond the initial stages of our setup, but yes, the foundation which was set up 20 years ago. Jain Heritage Centers has many publications on Jain heritage, mainly different temples across the world, as well as north, south, west, and east of India. Jain Heritage Centers has many research publications. We have around 3,000 pages of research work which has been published already. From technology standpoint as well, Jain Heritage Centers is one of the websites which is top ranked around 3,500 Jainism keywords, right? So from tech perspective, we are also trying to do good work on the internet so that if anybody is searching for Jainism related stuff, they can easily find that out. Our glorious 20 years of effort, which we really feel proud of. In a very quick snapshot, heritage conservation is what is our focus. The first Korean documentary was published by Jain Heritage Centers, and we feel really proud of you. This first book in Slavic language is what Jain Heritage Centers published. We have been supporting many international research articles sitting from India in last 20 years. Beyond that point, at local level or a grassroots level, we are involved in different activities like Mahamastika Visheka. In last two occurrences of Mahamastika Visheka, Jain Heritage Centers participated there. We also try to focus on spreading a lot of awareness about issues with respect to Jainism, such as Sallekha issue, such as attack on Jain Munis and all that. We try to put our effort there as well. Protest against wrong portrayal of Lord Bahubali. That was one of the things which we have done in the past. And having said that, I think main focus is not only Jain heritage, but also we are trying to spread Jainism and trying to keep ourselves connected to the local grassroots level. Archaeology Pavilion was created by Jain Heritage Centers during the Mahamastika Visheka, which was visited by lakhs of people during the Mahamastika Visheka time. Sallekha movement, as I already spoken about, we hosted many webinars with Madras University in the past, and those were very successful to educate people about Jain heritage. We keep on running many webinar series about Jain heritage. This is the special one of our celebration of 20 years. Nitin has published a book, Jinyatra, that was published a couple of years ago, and Nitin himself is also involved the Young Jains movement in Southern India. We strongly believe, though we have already completed 20 years, we strongly believe that the journey has just started and there is a lot which we can do or contribute to the good cause. So in today's session, the first session we will have is from Nitin about Jain inscriptions on of Karnataka. Bukkaraya inscription is especially Nitin is going to talk about. Before I hand it over to Nitin, let me put little bit talk about little bit about Nitin. So Nitin, first of all, I think I feel very proud and happy today that I am hosting Nitin and I'm introducing Nitin to speak about the inscriptions. Nitin has been my brother, my friend for last 20 years, or I think it's more than 20 years. I would personally call him the Jain Ratna, the young Jain Ratna. That's what I would call him, because his dedication is not only inspiring others, but personally, his dedication also inspires me a lot. Many times when I'm personally connected on Jain issues or Jain, something to do with Jainism, and I get distracted, I get busy here and there, Nitin is one person, right, who again comes back, and whenever we talk, he comes me or pull me back into the flow, and then I'm again back. So he is a good inspiration as well to look at. His dedication is commendable, and I think whatever I talked about Jain Heritage Centers is something Nitin is the single-handed man behind the Jain Heritage Centers. He is the founder of the organization. So whatever we say about the Jain Heritage Centers is all because of Nitin's dedication and his effort and his commitment to Jainism. So with this, I would hand it over to Nitin to take over. Nitin, over to you. Thanks once again to pick up this topic and talk about it.
Thank you, Yogesh ji. Probably you will have to stop sharing your screen.
Yep.
Namo Siddhanam. Jai Jinendra, everyone. While we speak about Jainism, its history, heritage, and the way the religion has gone through over the centuries, at least over the past 2,000 to 2,300 years of written history that we have, or even before that, since the time of Lord Mahavira, Jainism has gone through a lot of changes. It has adapted itself to a lot of changes, and has also gone through a lot of challenges. And it has also responded to the challenges, got over the challenges, and has come out of it, and has also responded to that. At the same time, it has also been subject to some of the onslaughts. And when we look about the history, when we speak about the history of any religion or any country, the first thing that comes out is what is the written history that we have. And when it comes to the written history, the two important sources of written history are the Jaina manuscripts, or the Tadapatri, or the Olegari Granthas, as it is said in Kannada, and rather, along with the manuscripts, we have something called as the inscriptions. Inscriptions are living proofs of the happenings of what has happened in the past. While we look at these inscriptions, when we look about Jain history and heritage, the Jaina inscriptions at different parts of India and also at Karnataka, we have about 2,000 plus inscriptions in Karnataka, or even more, close to 2,500 Jain inscriptions, particularly in Karnataka. And each of these inscriptions tell us a lot of tales, a lot of stories about the various happenings related to Jainism. And one such very important inscription is the Bukkaraya inscription. What is this Bukkaraya inscription? What does it say? And what are the details related to the Bukkaraya inscription? Let's try to understand about that. And with this, let me start off with the main topic of this lecture, that is Bukkaraya Inscription. And when it comes to Bukkaraya Inscription, many people have a lot of misconceptions about it. Probably this lecture might be an eye-opener and will try to put an end to a lot of these misconceptions about what it is and find details within the Bukkaraya inscription. Let's try to explore those details. And which is this inscription? It's not a single inscription. For a matter of fact, there are two inscriptions, one at Kalya, a village in the Magadi Taluk of Ramanagara district in the state of Karnataka in India, and Shravanabelagola, a very well-known Jain heritage and history and archaeological place in the Hassan district of Karnataka, again in India. And this is called as Bukkaraya inscription. And why were these inscriptions installed? The Jains appealed to the Vijayanagara king Bukkaraya, stating that the Vaishnavas killed them without any justification, and the Jains were subject to a lot of challenges, a lot of misdeeds by the Vaishnavas, due to which they appealed to Bukkaraya, and Bukkaraya invited the leaders of both the religions, that is the Jains and Vaishnavas, and tries to resolve the conflict and gets these inscriptions installed. That is what these inscriptions are about. It is called as Bukkaraya inscription. Then let's have a look at both of them. Let's see what the details are. This is what is the inscription in its latest form. This is a picture that was taken a week ago. If you see this inscription and the background, this inscription is found in the middle of open fields at a village called Kalya in the Magadi Taluk of Ramanagara district in Karnataka. And this inscription was just lying here and there without anyone to take care of. Thankfully, thanks to the personal interest by a couple of individuals, localites over there, a platform has been built around it with proper protection, and details about it are being given over there. And as you see over here, you see this is one of the best examples to our people as to how an inscription or an idol lying in the open air should be protected, and so that we can take our history to the future generations. And again over here, if you see the inscription, I have deliberately given two sides of the inscription. You find one side, this is the front side, and what you see in the side, this is again the right side, the left of the inscription. The reason I have specifically given this is because we have inscriptions on this side and as well as on the left side. Next, moving on. Like I mentioned, it is located in the middle of the field. The inscription is carved on two sides, that is on the front and left. The front is about 6 feet 9 inches and 2 feet. It has around 49 lines. The left is about the same measurement, 6 feet 9 inches by 9 feet thick, and does about 11 lines. In all, it has about 56 lines. And the language here is again Kannada. And the period is given as 1290s Kilaka Samvatsara Shravana Shuddha 2nd May, which corresponds to 17th July 1368. And what you see, the image with the blue background, these are the inscription has been scanned through a technology, latest technology using laser technology, and it is subjected to 3D scanning by the Mythic Society of Bangalore. And this is the latest scanning that was done just less than 1 or 2 months back. And this is a summary of the inscription. And this is one of the, again, a good examples to showcase and to the people as to how can we protect the inscriptions for the future generations, for the posterity. And then I'm just trying to quote the opening lines of the inscription. You will understand why is that I'm trying to quote the opening lines of the inscription. It says, Swasti Samasta Prashasti Sahitam Pashanda Sagara Mahavadava Mukhagni Sriranga Raja Charanambuja Mula Dasaha Shri Vishnu Loka Mani Mantapa Margadayi Ramanujo Vijayate Yati Raja Rajaha. what is this shloka about? This is the shloka that praises the Vaishnava Guru Ramanujacharya, and this has been taken from the work Dhati Panchaka. This work, particular shloka informs about Ramanujacharya's religious victories and teachings. Pashanda Sagara means Pashandas were like a great ocean. It was during the time that they were active that Swami Ramanuja appeared like a Badaba fire. What is Badaba? Badaba is the name of a female horse. As per the Puranic references, it says that there is a female horse in the middle of the ocean, that it has a fire on its face that never goes out. It is this fire that absorbs the excess water coming into the ocean and prevents it from reaching its shores. And that during the Pralaya, that is when the world comes to an end, it is this fire that comes out and destroys the world. And it means Ramanuja controlled the ocean of Pashandas like the Badaba fire. He exhibits the quality of fire to both the create and destroy. He sheds light on the right path to the devotees, while he also acts like a wildfire in destroying the other sampradayas. Sri Ranga Raja Charanambuja Moola Dasaha, which means Ramanuja had his head at the divine feet of Lord Ranganatha always. Sri Vishnu Loka Manimantapa Margadhai. The showering grace on the devotees is not just removing their obstacles, such as defeating the Pashandas, it is also giving them the way they seek. Thus, Ramanuja also showered the path to liberation. He set the path to the divine Mandapa or Mantapa, that is in the Lord's abode, which is referred to here as Tirumani Mandapa. And thus, Ramanuja is present victoriously as the king of all yatis at Sri Rangam. He was present is present and will be present as long as this Leela Vibhuti exists. That is what this particular shloka says. You might be wondering, why is Nitin speaking about a Ramanuja or a Vaishnava shloka at the beginning about in a Jaina lecture? You will realize it as we move on. Again, like I mentioned, the period of this inscription is about 1290, Kilaka Samvatsara Shravana Shuddha second Monday, which corresponds to 17 July 1368. When this inscription was installed, the Karnataka Samrajya, that is the Vijayanagara, was ruled by King Bukkaraya. During this period, there happens to be a lot of arguments and controversies between the Jains and Bhaktas. Bhaktas here refers to Vaishnavas. And the Jains of Anegundi, Hosapattana, Penugunde and Kalya appealed to the Vijayanagara King Bukkaraya, stating that the Vaishnavas are killing them without justification. Okay, and moving on. At this point, the Vijayanagara King Bukkaraya invites the Vaishnavas belonging to the 18 countries, namely Kovil, Sri Rangam, which is near at Tiruchirappalli of the present Tamil Nadu, Tirumale or Tirupati in Andhra, the present Tirupati, Peruma Kovil, Kanchipuram in Tamil Nadu, and all Acharyas, the religious gurus, Samayigalu, then Satvikas, people with good thinking, Moshtikas, Tirupani, Tiruvidi, Tamini, and many others, and the people of the Jambavakulas, all of them who are living at Tirunarayanapura. What is this Tirunarayanapura? It is nothing but the present Melukote in Mandya district of Karnataka. Then, moving on, it further says, Bukkaraya keeps the hands of the Jains on the hands of the Vaishnavas and says, Jains will look up to you or their darshana and they can play the Pancha Mahavadyas. The differences between the two groups should not come again, and the Vaishnavas will install an inscription in all basadis of the state. This is what this particular inscription at Kalya says. Now, let's move on to what is it about? What is it got to do with the Shravanabelagola inscription? Where is this inscription located? This is an inscription located to the east of Bhandari Basadi or Bhandara Basadi at Shravanabelagola, the lofty temple with the 24 Tirthankaras. Just to the right of the inscription, on its right of the temple, on its east is found this inscription. The inscription is carved only on the first side, in contrary to the other where it was carved on two sides. And it is about 35 lines. Its language is Kannada, and its period corresponds to 1290 Skilaka Samvatsara Bhadrapada Shuddha 10th Thursday, which is 24th August 1368. Now, these are all the lines of the inscription. Let's not get into the details. This is just for people's information. And as we move on, if you see here, what does this inscription says? The inscription starts with the praise of the Sri Vaishnava apostle or the Guru Ramanujacharya. And this is similar to the invocation of what we read at Kalya. And its period, like already mentioned, it corresponds to 24th August 1368. And to summarize the content of this inscription, when Mahamandaleshwara, the king of kings, who never went back on his words, Veera Bukkaraya was ruling, a tussle between the Jains and Bhaktas, that is the Vaishnavas, erupts. The all Jaina Shravakas or the householders of Anegundi, Hosapatana, could be Hampi or Shravanabelagola. We'll come to that later on. Was Hosapatna Hampi or Shravanabelagola? That is another question mark. Penugunde, or the in the present Andhra Pradesh, Kalleha or the place Kalya, approached Bukkaraya and informs him about the injustice meted out to them by the Bhaktas and requests him to protect them. At this point, King Bukkaraya invites the Vaishnavas belonging to the 18 countries, point to be noted, 18 countries. And again, I repeat what I repeated earlier, people belonging to Kovil, Tirumale, Peruma Kovil, that is the Srirangam, Tirupati and Kanchipuram, and people of Tirunarayanapura or Melukote, and people from other Vaishnava places. But next, Shravanabelagola inscription further says, Bukkaraya takes the hands of the Jainas and places in the hands of the Vaishnavas and declares that there was no difference between the Vaishnavas and the Jains. He continues to say that the Jains, as before, are entitled to the 5 great musical instruments, also called as Panchavadya, and the Kalashas or Vase. If any loss or advancement is caused to the Jains by the Vaishnavas will have to consider that as a loss to themselves. The Sri Vaishnavas will, to this effect, kindly set up a Shasana or an inscription in all basadis of the kingdom, not one or two, all basadis where the Vijayanagars ruled. We will see how big it was in the future slides. For as long as the sun and moon exist, the Vaishnavas will continue to protect the Jains. That is what it says. Furthermore, he further continues to say the Vaishnavas and the Jains are one body. They must not be viewed as different. The Tatya, one of the religious leaders of Tirupati, will please note this point, out of the money levied from every Jaina house throughout the kingdom, appoint 20 servants as a bodyguard for the god at Belagola and repair the ruined Jain temples and apply paints to these temples out of the leftover amount. He who transgresses this decree, he who opposes this particular judgment, is considered as a traitor to the king, a traitor to the Sangha and the Samudaya. Sangha means the religious guru, and Samudaya means the community. In addition to this, in the top there are 3 lines which says Bhuvi Shetty, the son of Harvi Shetty of Kalleha, the present Kalya, requests Bukkaraya to invite Tatya of Tirumale and get the temples renovated. And the people of both the regions give the position of a Sanganayaka to Bhuvi Shetty. Okay, moving on. What are the locations about? Look at this. You have Bangalore here, and as you go down, just nearer to Bangalore is Kalleha or Kalya, and you have Shravanabelagola, and adjacent to Shravanabelagola is the place which I mentioned as a Vaishnava center called as Melukote, and we have Hampi and here and Anegundi here, the names that came during our discussion. They'll also come in future. And you also have Penugonda in Andhra Pradesh here. And as you see here, you have Tirumala or Tirupati, and you have this Kanchipuram, we have Srirangam, and you have Malayuru, or which is adjacent to the Jain heritage site, Kanakagiri, known after Acharya Pujyapada. Now, this is the geographical thing. And if you see here, above Hampi, you see the northern part of Karnataka, where you see Hubli, Dharwad, Belgaum, and Vijaypura or the Bijapur, and the Raichur district, which is again part of Karnataka. Adjacent to that, you see a few of the places in Andhra Pradesh, and here you see a few of the places in Maharashtra. Now, let's move on. This is just to give you a sense of how exactly the names of places that have come up over here are located geographically with the current times. Then, moving forward. In addition to this, like I mentioned, we have come across the details of these two inscriptions. In addition to this, there are many other works that come up that were published from time to time. And I mentioned the place called Malayuru, which is adjacent to Kanakagiri. This place had the birth of a Jain scholar who lived during the 19th century called as Devachandra. He writes the work Rajavali Kathasara. And Rajavali Kathasara is a compilation of various historical aspects. And Devachandra many a times is considered as one of the first or the initial historians of Kannada language, where he tries to document the various happenings of the Jain history, or in general, the history around that place and the period through his work Rajavali Kathasara. The entire incident of what happens at Shravanabelagola is being clearly depicted in his book. It is narrated as below. The Jains inform Bhuvi Shetty about the Jain monuments and the Jain's monuments being destroyed by Sri Vaishnavas. And there happens to be a young person of the Vaishnavas called as Singachari, and Bhuvi Shetty tells Singachari, please tell your people to stop this injustice. The young Singachari gives an arrogant reply to Bhuvi Shetty and doesn't care for his words. With the intent of protecting the monuments, Bhuvi Shetty was really taken aback by Singachari's arrogant reply, but still he had an intent that he wants to protect the Jaina monuments. He climbs the hillock at Shravanabelagola and sleeps overnight. And even there, Singachari doesn't stop his atrocities. He and with some of his associates tries to kill Bhuvi Shetty. However, they were not successful. They make a futile attempt to kill Bhuvi Shetty. Then, the next day, Bhuvi Shetty, along with a few of his associates, approaches Singachari and requests him to stop the violent act against the Jains. Singachari says, even then, he continues his arrogance and he denies. And he replies negatively on the negativity. And Bhuvi Shetty really gets ignited. He starts having verbal exchange of words with him and says, Jain philosophy is true and others are untrue. And finally, the Jains and Vaishnavas approach Bukkaraya. Bhuvi Shetty, in front of the king, Bukkaraya, rolls a heated molten metal ball on his body and keeps it back. Bukkaraya calls for Tirumale Tatyacharya and informs him about the injustice meted out to the Jains by the Vaishnavas. Okay. Then, dejected by this, unhappy with this, the Vaishnavas agreed to live in harmony with the Jains. An inscription was installed to the right of Bhandari Basdi at Shravanabelagola, and the details of the inscription are also given. So, what I have done here is I have narrated a clear-cut picture about what is written in the two inscriptions, the one at Kalleha or Kalya, and also at Shravanabelagola. And I've also given the relevant proofs that have been extracted from Devachandra's Rajavali Kathasara. Next, moving on, let's look at some of the interesting aspects in this particular inscription. The Kalya inscription is installed 5 weeks prior to the one at Shravanabelagola. Look at the period. Kalya's inscription was on 17 July 1368, whereas Shravanabelagola inscription was on 24th August 1368. Anegundi, a place near Hampi. Anegundi, you see the name of the place, Anegundi. It is a place near Hampi, which was an important Jaina center during the 14th century AD. Even to this day, you can find 7 to 8 Jain inscriptions, a couple of them being Salekana memorial inscriptions. And you can also see a Jain temple here. And there is another name called as Hosapatna. Some of them of the scholars are of the opinion that this is Hampi, and a few say it is Shravanabelagola. And another important aspect to note here is in both the inscriptions, Shravanabelagola is not explicitly mentioned. However, it is mentioned in Devachandra's Rajavali Kathasara. So this gives us enough opportunity to conclude Hosapatana might be Shravanabelagola. Why the name Hosapatana can be correlated to Shravanabelagola is because even to this day, 6 kilometers away from Shravanabelagola, you have a place called as Hale Belagola. And they say that was the initial Jaina center, and later on Shravanabelagola evolved to be the Jaina center. Probably that might be one of the other reasons, because Devachandra's Rajavali Kathasar also mentions Shravanabelagola clearly. And since we have the another adjacent village nearby Shravanabelagola, where you have a Jain temple and a few Jain ruins, but you hardly have any Jain population, not even a single Jain community family there. So later on Shravanabelagola evolved. Hosa means new in Kannada. Patana means city, the new city. Probably the Hosa Patana referred to in this inscription, in these inscriptions, both of them rather, could be Shravanabelagola is what we might be able to argue. But however, a few of the scholars are of the opinion that it is Hampi. Then, in Kalya's inscription, Bhuvishetti's name is not mentioned. Whereas in the Shravanabelagola's inscription, Bhuvishetti's name and also his father, Harvi Shetti's name is also mentioned. Then, let's look at some of the opinions of some of the well-known scholars. Both Jain and non-Jain scholars have done extensive research and study about these inscriptions, about both these inscriptions. One of the renowned scholars of Karnataka, Dr. M. Chidanandamurthy, says the inscription at Kalya was the original one, and the one at Shravanabelagola is a much more refined version. What do you mean by refined version? He, in his study, he has identified the tensions the Jain community might have gone through and the aggressive nature of the Vaishnavas. To prove that, he has quoted the lines, Bhaktaru, Bhaktas means Vaishnavas, Anyayadalu, through injustice, Koluvudanu means killing, Vinaham Madalagi, a request about the Vaishnavas killing in an unjustified manner, which means a request was made to stop the unjustified killing by the Bhaktas, that is Vaishnavas. And furthermore, there is one more Kannada line that he's written as a summary of this. He says, Garshanegala monachannu mondu madirabahudu, means to say the struggle that happened between the two communities might have been subsided, might have been minimized, but however, maybe even the amount of unwanted things, anahutas, or the unwanted things might be reduced, but the struggle might not have been paused permanently, is what Dr. M. Chidanandamurthy says. Let's move on. What is one of the other well-known scholars of Kannada literature, another research scholar, Dr. M. Kalburgi, says? Looking at all these details, he says, it is evident that the Jain structures were in a dilapidated condition at Shravanabelagola during the 14th century due to the Vaishnavas. Okay. It further says, Bukkaraya had ordered appointing 20 servants as a bodyguard for the god at Belagola and to repair the ruined Jain temples. This further indicates as to what was the state of affairs of the Jain temples at Shravanabelagola and to what extent they were ruined during this period, that is during the 14th century. Furthermore, he continues to say, both the inscription starts with Ramanuja Stuti and Vaishnava symbols. What are the Vaishnava symbols that are there in both the inscriptions? The conch or the Shanka or the conch, the Chakra or the wheel, and the Tirunama, the three vertical lines or the things that they wear on their forehead. And it does not start with any Jaina symbols or the Jaina shlokas. Point to be noted again. Which are the Jaina shlokas? Usually 70 to 80% or 75 to 80% of the Jain inscriptions in Karnataka and in Kannada, they start with Srimat Paramagambira Syadva Damoga Lanchanam Jiya Trailokya Natasya Shasanam Jina Shasanam. However, in both the inscriptions, we don't see either of these inscriptions, any of the Jain shlokas being mentioned. But they start with the invocation to Ramanuja. It starts with the Vaishnava shloka. Point to be noted. Again, since the security and safety of the Jains at Shravanabelagola was a concern, he says that is the reason why another copy might have been installed at Kalya. Let's look at what Professor Hampa Nagarajaya sir says. A book that was released yesterday in the United Kingdom, in its 5th volume, page number 76, he says, during the reign of the Vijayanagara kingdom, the Vaishnavas gained an upper hand and the trouble erupted. Some of the Jaina temples were either demolished or appropriated. Finally, the feud surfaced, assuming greater proportionate at Kalya, near Magadi, that what we have just seen in the 14th century. Neither the Vaishnava temples were destroyed nor the Vaishnavas were attacked. Whereas the Jaina temples were destroyed and the Jains were harassed, Jains were not allowed to carry any auspicious insignia in their religious procession. The humiliated Jains under the stewardship of Bhuvi Shetty or Basvi Shetty, son of Harvi Shetty of Kalya, they petitioned Bukkaraya, the Vijayanagara king, and sought justice. What we have seen all throughout. And King Bukkaraya summons both the parties represented by Basavi Shetty or Bhuvi Shetty of Kalya Patna, that is Kalya for Jains, and Tatya alias Tirumale Perumal of Magadi, Tirumale for Vaishnavas. After hearing their grievances, the king gave his verdict, striking a compromise so that cordiality and mutual respect should prevail. However, the whole incident and proceedings are graphically recorded, like we already mentioned, at the inscription at Kalya, and a copy is seen at Shravanabelagola. Like I mentioned earlier, the invocation or the praise of not any other god but of ascetic Ramanuja, not any of the Jaina gods, it clearly indicates that there is a strong influence of the Vaishnavas and that the judgment may not go in the Jains' favor. It is the Jainas who petitioned, expressing the damages done to their places of worship and hindrances for conducting religious rituals by the Vaishnavas. Whereas, like what it is evident, the Vaishnavas had no grievances because neither any of the Vaishnavas nor their Vaishnava temples were attacked. As a result of this appeal by the Jain community to the Vijayanagara king Bukkaraya, what was the relief given to the Jains? It was a heavy penalty, is what Professor Hampana sir says. The Jains had to pay money collected from every house of their community to Tatya of Tirumala, the Vaishnava chief, who in turn will appoint 20 bodyguards at Shravanabelagola or Belagola, we have already seen. And the remainder spent on the repair of the dilapidated Jain temples. Look at this, look at the irony. Jains had to pay for the appointment of the bodyguard selected by the Vaishnava chief. Thus, indirectly, the Jains were taxed heavily and were also deprived of the authority of appointing bodyguards to protect their Belagola Tirtha. Jains were even denied or deprived of the authority to appoint a bodyguard to safeguard their own place of worship. Furthermore, what was the punishment given to the Vaishnavas who had destroyed and appropriated the Jain temples and pestered repeatedly? Nothing. Instead of a penalty of the crime, Vaishnavas were rewarded. Instead of directing them to compensate the damages and losses to the Jains, they were empowered to appoint bodyguards at the cost of Jains, is what Hampana sir says. Bukkaraya, the Vijayanagara king, says Vaishnavas and betrayed Jains, is what sir says. The king failed to accord an impartial judgment. The Kalya inscription is an outstanding example of the nexus between the Vijayanagara king and the Vaishnavas, who together failed to award any justice to the Jains, is what Hampana sir says. However, he continues to say, the only solace or the saving moment for the Jains was that they were permitted to use Pancha Mahavadyas, or the five auspicious musical instruments, and Kalasha and the vase during their religious processions. The petitioner Basvi Shetty or Bhuvi Shetty was bestowed with the dignity of Sanganayaka, chief of the Jaina community, for having braved to petition the king to safeguard the Jaina community. One other important point, what we have seen over here is Pancha Mahavadyas and the Kalashas. Mention of Pancha Mahavadyas and Kalashas indicate by 14th century or even prior to that, a practice of the usage of Pancha Mahavadyas and the Kalashas was prevalent in the Jain community those days. Okay, moving on. Some of the important other aspects to be noted here. Penagonde was again a chief Jain center during the 14th century. And some of the Nishadis or Salekara memorial stones and few others indicate that Penagonde was a Jaina center. Kalleha, like already mentioned, is nothing but the present Kalya village. Balatkara Gana. This is another important aspect to be noted. According to Professor Hampana sir, he has clearly compared and studied the inscriptions of various places. And he says, if we carefully observe the Jain inscriptions of this period at Penagonde, that is in Andhra, Anegondi, that is adjacent to Hampi, and a few inscriptions near Akhanda Bagil or Shravanabelagola. Akhanda Bagil is nothing but one of the entrances while you climb up the Bahubali Hilak, or also called as Indragiri or Vindyagiri. All these inscriptions have the mention of Balatkara Gana. Balatkara Gana means in a Jaina community, there existed an hierarchical gradation of the Muni Sangha, which were called as Sangha, Gana, Gacha, Anvaya, Bhadi, Vibhava, and so on. Of that Sangha Gana, the second highest division is Gana, and you see the mention of Balatkara Gana in all the inscriptions, in many of the inscriptions found at Penagonde, Anegundi, and Shravanabelagola. Means to say, very clear, the Munis and the Jaina Gurus of Balatkara Gana were influential during the period of Bukkaraya's rule, that is during 1370s. Hence, the Jain devotees and merchants of this period and these places, influenced by their religious gurus, united together and might have approached Bukkaraya. Few other aspects. Who were the people present during the conversations? I already mentioned, point to be noted. Vaishnavas belonging to 18 countries, namely the Kovil, Srirangam, Tirumale, Tirupati, Peruma Kovil, Kanchipuram, many classes of people at Tirunarayanapura, Melukote, Mandya district, that is at Mandya district in Karnataka. The Jain groups that were present were only from 4 places: Anegondi, Pasapatana, could be Hampi or Shravanabelagola, Penagonde, and Kalya. Even if you consider Hampi and Shravanabelagola both, they were present only from 5 places, not more than that. Whereas you see there, people from the 18 countries who belong to the Vaishnava creed were present at the point. Means to say, at the same time, I clearly showed you the northern part of Karnataka in the map. At this point, Jainism was not at its best in northern Karnataka. Around 14th century, Jainism was subject to lot of onslaughts of the few other religions, and it was not at its best in northern Karnataka. Means to say, it was not in a great shape across. And even when it comes to the coastal Karnataka was under the rule of the Vijayanagar rulers, who were many of the coastal rulers were the Mahamandaleshwaras, or the governors of the Vijayanagar kings. And even they were like, we don't see any references of them being in any revolting, rather they were all accommodating and inclusive, which clearly indicates that the Vaishnavas were in majority during the negotiations at the place. On the contrary, the Jains were in low numbers. Usually, when you look at any mediation, even to this day, mediation between 2 different parties is done in such a way, it is ensured that both the parties are equally represented. However, here it appears that Vaishnavas outnumbered the Jains. Okay, then the Jains are at disadvantage. Both the inscriptions, what we studied, and the narration in Devachandra's Rajavali Kathasara clearly indicate that the Jains were at disadvantage. Jains were at the receiving end, and there was an unlawful killing of the Jains by the Vaishnavas. Pujas might have been stopped at the basadis, and the basadis were vandalized. All these, why was it? It's clearly evident from the inscriptions that due to the atrocities of the Vaishnavas during the period, Jains were at a disadvantage. And then look at the details I mentioned, point to be noted again, amount to be given for renovating the temples. Both the inscriptions and even Devachandra's Rajavali Kathasara clearly indicate that the money was levied to every Jaina house throughout the kingdom. As it is evident from the inscription, it was only the Jains who were asked to pay the money and not the Vaishnavas. Though in reality, the Jains were subject to the unlawful attack of the Vaishnavas. Since the attack was made by the Vaishnavas, either they should have been asked to pay the money or they should have been also asked to pay part of the money. But what was the thing? Only the Jains were asked. And also, like all throughout, Jains have been the business class. Since the Jains were in low number, can we call this, or can this be termed as a financial oppression of the Jains? That's a question mark for all of us to think through. Then, to summarize, on clearly analyzing these two inscriptions and also the literature from Devachandra's Rajavali Kathasara, opinions of scholars, and considering the aspects that prevailed during the period, this gives a clear picture of the social, political, cultural, and financial status of the Jains and the Jain community in the region and the period. It's a clear indication that Jains were not socially, politically, culturally, and financially strong in the region during this period. Many historians says, and researchers have said, these two inscriptions can be termed as Dharma Samanvayateya Shasana. That is, they call them as inscriptions of religious harmony. Is that right or wrong? It's a matter of debate again. But maybe these two inscriptions probably are mere proofs of history of the religious, social, and cultural situation of the Jains and Vaishnavas of the period and the region. Moving on, King Bukkaraya's mediation can be termed as which it stopped the situation of the Jains from going from bad to worse, like what Hampana sir mentioned. The only solace for the Jains was that they were permitted to use Panchamahavadhyas, the 5 auspicious musical instruments, and the kalashas and the vas during the religious processions. Very clearly, what is the learning from this to the community of the present times? Because there is a very popular saying, a person who doesn't know history cannot create history. Okay. So, what is the learning here? It is a learning to the community of the historical instances of how our ancestors came over the challenges, and is an indication to the present generation that we should not get into tussles between communities, but past is past. Don't get into tussles between the communities, but instead live in harmony for the betterment of their groups, humanity, and mankind. I think this is a message that should go out as an outcome of the study of this particular inscription, is what I feel. I think with this, I will conclude my lecture on Bukkaraya inscription, and I will hand it over to my dear friend Yogesh Jain. Yogesh Jain, over to you.
Thanks, Nitin, for this very enlightening research work. Definitely, at least I can say, with a lot of information, and I can now possibly pronounce the name Bukkaraya correctly. Yeah. So thank you so much. I think it has been a topic which, in my opinion and with my knowledge, no one has touched yet on a public forum. Definitely, there is a research which you talked about. our Acharya Hampa ji has also done, and there is a slide which we looked at coming from him directly. So that's really, really great. Thank you so much once again. And now we will proceed to our next part of the today's webinar.